Well, hello. It is that time again for another Simply Saturday where I'm going to show you a card that is fast and easy to make. My name is Julie, and this is Stamp with Julie Baum. I've been a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator for many years, and I love it as much today as I did all those years ago. And I am excited to show you this card today, which I think you're going to like. We're going to be making a card with the Boutique Blossoms. And for today, we're only using the stamps. We are not using the dies that are available as a bundle currently. But in our fast and easy card, we will not be cutting anything out. So we'll just be using the stamps. I'm going to be using Crisp Cantaloupe and Peaceful Pine for our ink colors. And we're going to be doing several layers. And so let's talk about our pieces and get our basic measurements down. I hope that you will consider crafting along with me today, or perhaps just watching the video and coming back later and making this card at another time. All right, let's talk about our card base. It is a piece of white cardstock. It's up to you if you want to use the thick white or the regular weight. Typically, if I make my card base out of white cardstock, I will use thick, but I am putting several layers on this card, and so I feel like the necessity for that is not as great. So it's up to you. My piece is 4¼ inches by 11 inches, and I have already scored it here at 5½ inches. I'm going to make a fold there, and then using my bone folder, I'm going to reinforce the fold, making a nice crisp crease. All right, then I have a piece of designer series paper. And as I always do, I'll put some notes for you below this video, including some of the details that you might not catch or that I might forget to give you as I'm leading the tutorial here. So be sure and look for those in the drop-down menu below the video. Here's our piece of DSP, measuring 4 inches by 5¼ inches. I then have another piece of designer series paper, and this should coordinate nicely with your first piece. So I don't want it to compete, but I want it to complement it, and that's what I've chosen here. These are both from the same packet of paper, but are clearly different prints. And I thought that the subtle print here with the crisp cantaloupe background was nice against this white print that also has the metallic in it. All right, so that piece measures 3 inches by 4¼ inches. And then we need another piece of basic white cardstock. This piece measures 2½ by 3¾ inches. So there's our pieces. Now I do have 2 more pieces that I'm going to use on the inside of the card. This is optional and it's up to you. But if you want to follow along, I'm using then a piece of crisp cantaloupe cardstock that is 3½ inches by 4¾ inches, and a basic white cardstock 4½ by 3¼ These are going to be for the inside of my card, and as I mentioned, this part would be optional. All right, we're going to do our stamping on this piece, so let's just jump in and do that first. I'll be starting with Peaceful Pine. I'm going to make an anniversary card, which I'm quite confident I have never done a tutorial making an anniversary card. So I really liked the stamps and the images in this stamp set, Boutique Blossoms, and I needed to grab some words. And so I chose phrases and frames for the happy anniversary. All right, you can clearly change this up and put a different sentiment on here if you wish. Here is Peaceful Pine and my happy anniversary stamp. I'm going to place that at the top of the white piece, centered between the right and the left, like so. Then we're going to add one of those big, lovely flowers from the stamp set. And I'll be using crisp cantaloupe for this. I'm going to stamp the outline first. Depending on the stamp set, when it's a two-step stamp set where you're going to be combining two different stamps to create your image, I go back and forth. I don't typically have a rule if I do the main image, the filler of the stamp, and then follow it up with the outline, or vice versa. So on this particular one, I really like to put the outline down first. And so that's what I'm showing you. Then when it comes to the filler that's going to complete my flower, I'm going to use the same color of ink. I'm going to pick up my ink and then I'm going to stamp it off on a piece of scratch paper. And then onto my cardstock. So this way I'm getting a lighter version of that crisp cantaloupe ink. It's fairly easy to line up, and that gives you a very soft image. It's just barely filled in. Crisp cantaloupe is a light color, and so is barely blush. So when you stamp those off, you're going to get a very light color left over. All right, now I'm going to do some leaves in the same manner. So back to Peaceful Pine and the outline of my 3 leaves. And then continuing with Peaceful Pine, stamp it off on my scratch paper. And then onto my outline. Like so. The stamps do have a built-in design to them where they kind of have natural shading already built in. You can really see that on these leaf inserts. So I'm pressing down, I've fully inked, and when you get a nice clean impression, you're going to see that there's some light and dark built in to the artwork of the stamp itself. The flower works the same way. So you're going to get that definition and artistic look from the stamps. All right, we've got that done. I'm going to take that piece now and attach it to that piece of designer series paper. This is going to be its mat. So let's grab some liquid glue. This one could be at its last leg. Let's try another one. I say this sometimes in my videos that I use lots of glue in my in-person classes. And so I'm often left with multiple bottles that are almost empty. And I try to get those used up before I toss them. All right, there we go. A little bit of ink, a little bit of glue goes a long way. So I want to get close to my edges, a little squiggle across the middle. You don't want to over glue or you're going to end up having a real mess when it squeezes out from the edges of your paper. So there is a little bit of practice sometimes necessary with getting just the right amount of glue. All right, I've got that attached to my designer series paper, and you can see how beautiful now that crisp cantaloupe paper looks behind our stamped image. All right, let's set that aside for one moment, and we'll go ahead and attach this piece to our card base. Same thing, a little glue goes a very long way. And this is going to get centered onto the white card base. So you'll have a little bit of white cardstock showing all the way around. All right, at this point, this little part that we've already created is going to go on here. But before we do that, we're going to take our linen thread. And I'm going to show you a little trick today that I do sometimes. First, let's look at what you would typically think is being done. And there's nothing right or wrong about either methods. So it's totally up to you. So I want my linen thread to be wrapped around the card and then a knot tied. So one way to do that would be to hold the tail right here where I'm going to end up tying the knot, wrap my twine or my thread around the card, bringing the other end up, and then tying my knot. This is totally acceptable, and it might be the way that you want to do it, and that's great. But I am going to show you another method. The reason that I sometimes choose to do it a different way is now that I've got these two ends and I need to tie the knot, and I want it to be pretty snug right here. Sometimes it's difficult with all your fingers and holding the thread taut and then trying to tie your knot. Sometimes it's just too much. Now, one way to handle that is to take your reverse scissors, not scissors, tweezers, and use that to hold that area while you tie your knot. That is a valid option, but I'm going to show you a different way in case you like this method better. So I'm going to undo that and we will begin again. I'm going to get a couple pieces of tearing tape, and then we're also going to use our dimensionals. All right, so I'm going to start with a tiny piece of tearing tape, and this step you could choose to skip and just go straight to the dimensionals, but I'm going to simplify it a little bit in case you're a beginner and there's just too many things going on. All right, so I've got my two pieces of tape. I'm just going to set them here so they're ready to grab. All right, with my linen thread now, I'm going to put this on the back of the card or the piece that I'm using, just barely. I only need a teeny little tail. I'm going to wrap it to the front and make sure it's about right. See, it's a little low, so I'm going to move it up a little bit. And I can see that that's going to come right across the leaves where I want it to. So at that point, I'm going to use a piece of tearing tape and just hold that tail in place. All right, now I am going to give you a teeny bit of a warning because as I'm stamping, my UPS delivery is about to come to the door, and there's a good chance that my dog Pino is going to bark. So, oh, there it is, as if on cue. All right, go on. We have our piece here taped onto the back, and I do apologize for that extra noise. This is now going to get wrapped around the front of the card once, and I'm going to go twice, and then I am going to secure this on the back with that second piece of tape, just like that. And I'm going to cut my linen thread very, very, very close to that tape because I need the rest of this length to finish my goal. All right, so those are now taped on nice and tight, which is exactly what I need. And hold, please. Now that that has been done, I'm going to take the piece that I have left and I'm just going to tuck it under these wrapped pieces, and I'm going to tie my knot. So this has created the nice tight wrap on my card, and I'm able with just two hands and not struggling at all to tie my knots. And I just think that that's an easy way to do it. There we have it. And then I'm just going to snip this to the desired length, like so. All right, we're going to go to our Stampin' Dimensionals now. As I mentioned, you could have gone ahead and secured this with the dimensional. That would be an option. But the reason I didn't is I don't really need dimensionals right there. I need them for sure in my corners. And I may want one in the middle. And honestly, I felt like it was a little bit of a waste to put the dimensional there and then still need it here and here. So that's why I chose not to hold the thread down with the dimensional. All right, at this point, we can get this attached to the front of the card. And then we will move on with our embellishments and the inside. All right, that is now in place and looks lovely. I have another completed sample that I'll show you where I used some of these retired sequins. They were called adhesive backed glitter sequins, and I picked the gold ones out and used them on the card, and they're very nice. But because these are retired, I wanted to show you something that's current that you can get, and that would be the metallic gems. And we'll pull about 3 of these to do the decoration on our card. I'm going to use all small ones, but that's just my choice. You can do what you think looks best. On the sequins, I used large ones. All right, I like how the metallic gems pick up the metallic centers of the flowers. I think that that is a really nice touch. Let's do the inside. All right, we're going to just do some simple stamping on here, and then we'll give it a crisp cantaloupe matte. All right, because we did the anniversary card, I decided to stick with it, and we're using these little this little verse that goes with the anniversary greeting. And we'll just put that not quite at the top, down a little ways, but centered right and left. It will just barely fit because the size of our paper, but that looks very nice. Let's attach that to the crisp cantaloupe. And then we'll put this on the inside of the card. Now, this part is optional because the inside of the card is already white. So if you had wanted to, you could just stamp the words here. That would be totally acceptable. I just really liked the idea of adding this extra panel with the matte behind it. So that part is up to you. All right, so we've got this now in place. And that is going to wrap up today's episode. Let me show you the other version with the other embellishment. Here is our card with the metallic gems. And here is the same card, but with some glittery sequins. So you can see there would be many ways to add some embellishing to this look. And there you have it. Thank you so much for stopping by to watch this video today. And until next time, happy stamping.